What's up, everybody? Johnny Ciccatelli here with Jimmy Naples, Steel Valley Syndicate, coming to you again from downtown Crimetown, USA, Youngstown, Ohio. Another edition of Youngstown Mob Talk, and a special edition here that we get to introduce our first ever Mob Talk sponsors, Cut and Toast, which is a cigar company out of Struthers, Ohio. If you get to check them out, please do. They're on Lowellville Road. Thank you, Cut and Toast, for being our first ever sponsor.
Yeah, they got a wonderful place down there.
Yeah, and we're gonna do some cool things there.
Yeah, we got some big stuff, guys, coming. So stay tuned for that. And again, we want to thank Cut and Toast for being the first sponsor of the Youngstown group, Youngstown Mob Talk group. Big shout out to them, and we look forward to some big things we're going to be doing with them.
Can't wait to try out some of their stogies.
I know, right?
It's gonna be fun.
Yeah.
And like Jim said, we'll share some news of what we're doing with them in a couple weeks here, as we do some more videos over the month. But check out Cut and Toast, guys. They're awesome, and it's a local organization right here, local company right here in the Valley, and it's pretty cool. So, Jim, we're up to over 26,000 members. Man, what do you think about that?
Dude, we're just climbing. We had that little lull there for a minute, and it just kind of picked back up, and it's been great. I want to thank all the mob associates. You guys are what make this group what it is. Posting photos, FBI documents, newspaper articles, personal stories. So those are the things that make our group what it is.
Absolutely.
And I think that's a testament as to why our group keeps growing the way it has.
Yeah, and for everybody out there, if you've got friends or family from Youngstown, maybe they left Youngstown, share the group with them. Invite them as a member. Tell them what we do here. We share stories. We share, pictures, videos, files, all kinds of cool stuff. Just keeping the interest in the Youngstown mob scene and really exploring new avenues as much as we can. And, like Jim said, we really rely on everybody, all the members of the group, to contribute. So, we won't tolerate anybody being bullied out of the group or anything like that. So, if you see any kind of abusive behavior, just notify us, just report it. Or spam, if there's spam out there, we'll whack that guy. We'll take care of that account and block him.
Yep, we'll take him out, cement shoes for him. Huh? So I see that you got a big post on the YouTube page this week, the Crime Inc. BBC documentary.
Oh yeah,
Let's tell the viewers a little bit about that.
Yeah, guys. So first of all, that is on our YouTube channel. So please check that out. It's the Amazing Podcast Company, YouTube.com/Amazing Podcast Company. That's our YouTube channel for where we post all these Mob Talk videos. We also post as much mob stuff, Youngstown mob stuff, as we can whenever we find something. Recently, I posted all 7 parts of a legendary documentary on the American Mafia. It's actually done by a British documentary filmmaker named Martin Short, not the Canadian Martin Short that we all know. That'd be pretty funny.
Right, yeah.
But this documentary was made, I believe, in the 80s, and it focuses on all of the hallmarks of the American Mafia. You've got Chicago, New York, Las Vegas, and they actually touch on Youngstown. Briefly, just briefly. Denny Brand, a former WYTV reporter, was the one who told me about this. He was working for the station in Youngstown back in the early 80s. That was when this documentary film crew was filming this. And of course, the early 80s was a pretty big heyday for Youngstown Mob. So, of course, if they're doing a documentary on American Mob back then, they found their way to Youngstown. We don't get touched on too much. We're only in episode 4. And it's briefly, they're talking about the gambling and different, it goes from Las Vegas to some different numbers operations and things like that. And that's actually what they show in Youngstown is a smaller numbers operation that gets busted. And they quoted them as, in the documentary, they say that numbers operation was making $5,000 a day and pulling in about $1 million a year. That was one of the smaller ones. Early 80s, you got to think.
It's still quite a bit amount of money there.
Yeah, absolutely. And back then, who were the main players in the early 80s?
Early 80s, you got you had Krabby is there for a little bit. Of course, you had my Uncle Joey.
Joey Naples.
You know, that was really about it.
Lenny Strollo a little bit too.
Lenny, yeah.
They were under Lenny and Joey were under Briar Hill Jimmy at the time.
Right.
Jimmy Prado. So, they don't go into what organization or where exactly that numbers bust was.
Right.
But it's very brief. In chapter 4 of Crime Inc. So if you guys get a chance, check that out. We posted all 7 episodes on our YouTube channel. You can watch them for free. It's just it's a must watch for anybody who's a mob historian or aficionado or anything.
Definitely.
It gives so much background on the American Mafia that you really will learn a lot. So it is pretty cool that, of course, if they're going to do something that big, they had to touch on Youngstown a little bit.
Right. And it goes without saying, I'm a huge fan of the mob stuff. And so I'm always looking for new things. And I've never seen this one, so it's something I'd definitely sit down and watch when I get some time. And that leads us in. You were talking about Denny Brandt. I'm sure those of you that listen to the Crooked City podcast are familiar with Denny. He was in a few episodes there.
Yeah, we interviewed Denny. He was, in the early 80s, he worked at WYTV, and he became the trafficking guy. He was covering all the trafficking trials. So in the earlier episodes of Crooked City, he is on, you'll hear Denny a lot, his tape from all that trafficking coverage. Plus we interviewed him, and he gave some amazing backstory and context for what he was doing back then. And, Denny was a great guy. He's actually went on to become, I believe, a professor in Kentucky.
Nice.
And so Denny's a member of the group. So, thanks a lot, Denny. You were fantastic in Crooked City. Speaking of Crooked City, we're up to episode 12. If you don't binge the show, if you're watching or you're listening weekly, it comes out every Monday on wherever you get your podcasts. And we're up to episode 12. So it is called, this week's episode is No Place for an Honest Man. And it touches on some of the police corruption and some of the political corruption within Youngstown. To this point, we've heard a lot about Jim Trafficant. We've heard different guys, Frankie Suzanne, Mark Bacho, their kind of stories. This one is Paul Gaines' story. And if you don't know, Paul Gaines is our current Mahoning County prosecutor. At the time, in 1996, he was running for prosecutor, and he was up against a guy named James Filomena.
Yeah.
What do you know about James Filomena?
I know quite a bit about James. Funny story. James was part owner of the Wedgwood Pizza Shop in Boardman, and so that's kind of how I kind of knew him personally. Was because my first job in high school was working over there, and so that's actually how the first time I met James Filomena was actually in the pizza shop. He had come in, and it's funny because later on when I went back and I worked there for a little bit as a job to fill in when I was in between jobs when COVID and all that hit. His daughter works there. Nice, sweet girl. So that's kind of what my personal knowledge of Mr. Filomena is.
So James Filomena, I guess when he wasn't working on the pizza shop, he was a lawyer. And he was a successful defense attorney.
Yes.
Then eventually he became the county prosecutor of Mahoning County. He eventually got jammed up in a case-fixing scandal that involved Lenny Strollo and his whole crew.
Yeah.
That was kind of the downfall of the Youngstown mob. And this episode of Crooked City is really the beginning of that, the beginning of the downfall. So you'll hear a lot from Paul Gaines. We talked to Paul. Again, he ran for county prosecutor originally in 1996, and he won. He'll talk about his opponent, James Filomena, and how James kind of underestimated them. Didn't think Paul Gaines would win, didn't want to spend any money in the campaign, and Paul pulled it off. Paul won. You'll hear, if you never heard Paul's campaign video, his message out there. Yeah. It's one of those kind of strong videos, would work today even in the political climate. It's kind of a ticking clock kind of thing. He says, "This is our last chance." And this story, this episode, goes back to when Paul Gaines was a police officer. And if you're unaware, At the time, there was a police burglary ring going on.
Yep.
That's discussed a little bit in this episode, and just the overall corruption that was going on within the police force back then.
Well, it's funny. For those of you that didn't go to this, the public library had that little panel talking about organized crime in the valley.
Yeah.
For those that weren't there, it was funny the story that Paul mentioned. You remember he came into the office and they told him, "Hey, you need to go down and see Joey Naples down at the center," right? Remember that?
Mm-hmm.
And so he tells him, "Hey, you got to go see Joey," and he looks at him and goes, "I'm not doing that." And then what happened? He quit the next day, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, but that just shows the level of corruption that was in this town at one time.
Yeah.
I mean, it was. I mean, go back to the '60s. If you go back to the '60s, you look at my Uncle Sandy. You know, in the late '50s, they caught him sneaking out of the county jail. He would sneak out of county jail on Friday night. He would go home, go see his girlfriend. You know, on Sunday they'd have a family dinner, and then Sunday night he'd sneak back into the jail, and he'd be in jail from Monday through Friday, and the weekends he'd be out.
And correct me if I'm wrong, wasn't he related to someone at the jail? Wasn't there a Naples that worked at the jail?
I believe there was. Now I don't know if it was in that time frame, but yeah, we've had cousins and things in law enforcement. We've had cousins at YPD, cousins at the sheriff's office.
Jimmy's got a big family.
I got a huge family.
The Naples family is very, very well related in Youngstown. Lots of cousins. So I'm always, every time I talk to him, he'll say, we'll mention somebody else or so-and-so, and he'll go, "Oh, he's a cousin," or "She's a cousin of mine." So I've heard that about 1,000 times already. So
I know.
You've got a big family, and it's pretty cool.
And I got cousins that aren't even Naples, so that makes it even crazier, you know.
Well, so going back to this episode, Crooked City, again, we're on episode 12. There's only 15 episodes, guys, so it's coming to a close here in about 3 weeks. If you haven't listened to all of them already, if you want, you could binge them. Some people pay for it. There's like a $5. You know, a lot of people I know binged it. That's how I am. I'm that way, but that's through a subscription service called The Binge. But otherwise, it's for free every Monday with commercials, wherever you get your podcasts. And this week, like I said, we talk about, it's kind of Paul Gaines' story, and it goes all the way up into the moment that he was shot on Christmas Eve, 1996. So, you know, really step by step, you'll hear from Mark Baccio, who was the gunman, and it's kind of an infamous story. Many people are familiar with it, but if you listen to this week's episode, you'll learn something that you haven't heard before. I guarantee it, because you'll hear the inside story. There's even as kind of crazy as this is to say, there's even, you know, at least one kind of laugh out loud moment. You know, it's kind of bizarre. But there's a lot of coincidence, you know, things that happen that save Paul Gaines' life. And, you know, I don't want to spoil anything for the episode, so check it out, guys. Comment, you know, tell us what you think of the show. And, you know, we're getting close to the episode 15. We're getting close.
And really, if you think about it, that whole attempted assassination of Paul Gaines really was the beginning of the end of the mob in Youngstown.
Absolutely.
I mean, it kind of started when they killed Joey, you know, because from what I know, from personal stories that I've been told by family members and people that have worked with my Uncle Joey and things like that, I mean, he really had a control on this valley. Even when he was partnered with Lenny, he was really kind of the one that was kind of like, you know, driving the car.
Yeah, by all accounts, it was, you know, Joey was kind of, you know, in charge, where Lenny, and that's, you know, we've talked to a lot of folks that all said the same thing. You know, Lenny had that resentment towards Joey.
Yeah.
But, you know, I also got to say that after Joey died in 1991, right, August 1991, right. If what happened in 1996 didn't happen,
right,
they might not have ever got caught.
True.
Lenny Strollo might have ruled and up until the 2000s, and
right. I mean, really, you got a whole bunch of little, like, kind of, man, what would it be like if this didn't happen? So you got, what would it be like if they didn't kill Joey, or what would it be like if they didn't kill Ernie B? Mm-hmm. You know, what would it be like if they would have killed Paul Gaines? So you got all these kind of what ifs, and it's kind of
and it's interesting you say it like that, because in this episode, there's even so many of those minor moments, so many tiny moments when they were trying to kill Paul,
Right.
leading up to, him taking office in January of '97. There were so many moments where they went to try to kill him, and something happened.
Yeah.
It was they were at Buffalo Wild Wings, BW3s, and all of a sudden, the YSU students came in because it was homecoming, and that threw the guys off, and they didn't do it, and all these little things. His buddy took his car, so there's all kinds of little coincidences that really saved his life, honestly, because if one of those things hadn't happened, they might have killed Paul Gaines, and like you said, who knows what would have happened after that.
With the downfall of the mob in Youngstown, you have some parallels to the downfall of the mob in Cleveland, right? And it all comes back to who they used to carry out a hit, right? And it comes down to the details. They didn't pay enough attention to details, and the little things is what hurt them and cost them in the end.
Yeah, it was and just in both of those cases, luck too.
Yeah.
You mentioned Cleveland, and when Ronnie Carabia and Ray Ferrito, blew up Danny Green's car, the car next to his, and killed Danny Green, there was a few, just random lucky situations for law enforcement. They were driving away, and they passed this girl who was the daughter of a police officer, and she was a good sketch artist, and she sketched Ray Ferrito down to an exact sketch in just a passing car. I mean, so if they were, drove the other way, made a left instead of a right, then, so there's all kinds of little lucky things that law enforcement, was able to catch and some breaks.
It's kind of surprising, though, that those guys weren't paying attention to those details of who was. I mean, I understand that you just blew up a car and you're trying to get the hell out of Dodge, right? But you think before that, you'd kind of pay attention to some of the details of who was around and what your environment was.
They got him in broad daylight, in a crowded area. It was one of those strip malls, and they had the dentist's office there. So, I think they were getting desperate. Licavoli and his crew were getting desperate to get rid of him. That they just said, "Hey, let's do it there in broad, wherever we can get him," because they had tried to kill Danny Green several times. There's a good book and movie written by a friend of ours, Rick Perello, wrote the book, where that kind of documents different times they tried to kill Danny Green. He survived. Yeah. But in the end, how they get him, it was a Youngstown tune-up.
Exactly.
And in a modified one, like we said, it was not his car that blew up. It was the car next to his. They put a Joe Blow car next to his car, and when he came out, they ignited the switch.
Didn't they when they went to Ferrito's place up in Erie? Didn't they find the title or something for that Joe Blow car?
Yeah, and they found it had consecutive. I forget VINs or some consecutive numbers with the other cars that they used in the scene. So, Ray Ferrito was pretty sloppy. Yeah, he actually kept a lot of evidence. Kind of they found right there in his apartment. But and he of course ended up ratting out the other guys, and that was kind of the beginning of the end, the real end for Cleveland.
And Ray was one of those guys that kind of went around from family to family too, because he did some work for Cleveland, he did some work for Pittsburgh.
He went out to L.A. and he was working in L.A. He was a friend of Jimmy the Weasel Fratiano, who actually referred him to Licavoli for the Cleveland for Danny Green's hit. Yeah, and Youngstown connection here, Mahoney Valley connection. They planned Danny Green's hit on a boat on Mosquito Lake. Yeah. That's actually, Ferrito testified to that and said, who was all there, right? You had Ronnie Carabia, Butchie Cisterino, Licavoli. I'm sure there were others, but also Jimmy Fratiano. And that's eventually where they got Fratiano on the Rico murder case. Yeah, was in that case, and that was
how they got him to flip.
How they finally got Fratiano to flip, and
I mean he had been an informant for a long time. Yeah, but it was just little things here and there, nothing that could. I mean, it could have probably got back to him, but most of the stuff that he gave him was stuff that wouldn't, come back to him low end stuff, and that just to kind of keep him keep feeding him and keep him satisfied, right?
Which, by the way, guys, that's going back to the Crime Inc. documentary. A lot about Jimmy Fraziano in that Crime Inc. documentary. You'll even hear Frank Sinatra talking pretty ill of Jimmy Fraziano. There's a famous picture with Frank Sinatra and a bunch of mob bosses, including Jimmy the Weasel and the old man Carlo Gambino.
Yeah.
They're all there, and they're sitting around surrounded by Frank. And when Frank tried to get his license for, I think he was an entertainment director for one of the casinos out in Vegas, he had to go before this public, hearing. And they brought this up. They brought this picture up, and then they brought up Jimmy the Weasel Fraziano.
I was asked by one of the members of the theater who he was. Doesn't come to me. I don't think it's that important. He told me that Mr. Gambino had arrived with his granddaughter, whose name, perchance, happened to be Sinatra. And he said they would like to take a picture. And I said, fine. They came in, and I took a picture of the little girl. And before I realized what happened, there were approximately 8 or 9 men standing around me. That is the whole incident that took place.
Did you have any acquaintance with Mr. Gambino prior to that? Had you ever met him?
No, I never did. Not before nor after that.
Okay. Did you have any information about any of the people that were in that photograph with you? Did you know any of them by sight?
Well, Mr. Marsden, I think, was in the picture, whom I knew because he was one of the owners of the club, and I knew him. And I later found out that I was introduced to somebody named Jimmy, and I later found out it was this Fink the Weasel, so I didn't know him at the time.
Jimmy Fradiano.
Yeah.
He made a statement that he was going to take a picture with somebody's niece. This is the last picture we took in Westchester, and he says all of a sudden 8 men were around him. Well, that's a lot of baloney. He wanted to take a picture with Gambino, and he offered Gambino to come in the back. He wanted to meet him.
Check out that Crime Inc. documentary, but they touch a little bit about that in that show, The Offer, too. You know, which is pretty cool. So,
and the funny thing that you mentioned, Frank Sinatra, and then we'll get back to our post of the week here. So I'm going through old FBI affidavits, right? And I find a phone conversation between my grandfather and Sam Momo Giancana, who was the head of the Chicago outfit.
The outfit, yeah.
And there's a quote in there. They're discussing business, and Sam tells my grandfather, "You need to get your brother Joey in line, or he's going to wind up like his other 2 brothers." And then the conversation went from business to pleasure. And you have my grandfather asking him, "Hey, can I get some tickets to go see Sinatra?" And Sam's like, "Sure, whatever you want. Just let me know what you want. We'll take care of you,
Yeah.
And I asked my dad about that. He goes, "Oh, yeah, they used to go to Vegas all the time." And I had that one picture that we showed with Joey and Paulie in Vegas in the 70s. Mm-hmm. So, but yeah, it's pretty cool story. Let's turn into post of the week.
Yeah, that actually kind of a little bit of that discussion ties into our post of the week.
Yeah,
but,
it does.
Go ahead if you have one lined up. I know you wanted to touch on one of them in particular.
Yes. So this week we have Charlie Cavallaro. His post is on the movie The Godfather and the new show The Offer. Charlie's post here says, which word is never mentioned in the film The Godfather? Mafia is never mentioned. Mario Puzo and Francis Ford Coppola received a lot of backlash from the Italian-American Civil Rights League, which was led by Mafia boss Joe Colombo. They protested the way Italians were portrayed in the movie, and they made a deal not to use the word mafia, and also agreed to hire some experts to assist with the film. There were several actors who did have ties to organized crime, and they were given roles in the film. That includes the actors who portrayed Luca Brasi and Mo Green.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And we discussed it a little bit. And first of all, thanks, Charlie. Charlie's a been a member of the group. Long history there, connection to the organized crime, the Youngstown mob. But thank you for this post in particular because it's something different to talk about, and it leads us to that show, The Offer. which details the making of The Godfather. And Charlie's absolutely right. They never mention the word mafia in The Godfather Part 1. Later on in Godfather Part 2, I do believe they do, with the Senate hearings that they have and
Right.
that such, but you'll never hear it in Part 1. If you guys haven't watched this show, it's on Paramount Plus. It's called The Offer, and it stars Miles Teller and a lot of up and coming actors that fill some legendary roles. There's like a young Al Pacino character.
Yeah, and that's the one thing I got to say. The character they got to play, young Al Pacino, my God, he looks just like a young Al Pacino. I mean, if you just kind of were flipping through the channels and you flipped it on, you would swear that was Al Pacino.
Yeah.
Sounds like him and everything.
Yeah, absolutely.
So they did a fantastic job.
Same as Robert Evans, the guy who was he was an actor turned president of Paramount Pictures, and the guy who plays him is phenomenal.
Yeah.
I mean, he nailed him. I was a big fan of his old documentary, The Kid Stays in the Picture, if you haven't seen that. But this show, I mean, all these guys, the guy that plays Brando, everybody in this show,
and then the guy that plays Charlie Bluedorn,
Yeah.
who was the head of
Gulf and Western, which owned Paramount
Right.
at the time they made The Godfather.
He's fantastic in that.
Yeah.
He's a goofy, crazy guy, but the guy that played him is just fantastic. And then of course they have her first, I think her name's Juno. She was on
Juno Temple.
Yeah, Juno Temple. She's on Ted Lasso.
Okay.
So if you watch The Offer, those of you that are Ted Lasso fans, you will recognize her from Ted Lasso. And of course she's been in a bunch of other movies, but she's fantastic in this as well.
Giovanni Ribisi plays Joe Colombo.
Fantastic. He did a great job.
And there's actually the guy who plays the actor, the real Luca Brasi, the actor who plays Luca Brasi. Do you recognize him?
I didn't at first the first time I watched it, but I did the second time.
Lou Ferrigno.
Yeah.
The Hulk. He's
The
in there.
Hulk,
So it's
yeah.
pretty cool they threw him in there. But either way, guys, that show is based on the making of The Godfather. And it's all told through the producer of the film's perspective, Al Ruddy.
Yep.
Who was not an Italian. He was a Jewish producer, and I'm sure that they embellish, right? Every Hollywood production, changes some facts and some things. I'm sure they embellish a little, but it's very entertaining. If you get a chance, I recommend it.
Definitely.
It was actually entertaining. Behind the scenes, it's a lot about the real mob involvement with The Godfather. And in the beginning, The Godfather was not so well received within the
Right.
Italian community. It was a best-selling book. People thought Mario Puzo was a traitor.
He got a lot of backlash for it.
And a lot of it, we talked again about Frank Sinatra.
Yeah.
Because if you remember, of course, in The Godfather, in the book and the movie, the character Johnny Fontaine, the singer who has to get, who goes to The Godfather crying to get out of his contract, it was based on Frank Sinatra. That same kind of situation happened to Frank Sinatra early in his career. So, Frank Sinatra hated the project. He did not want to see it made into a movie, and he tried everything he could to stop it.
That he did.
And so, it goes all the way up to the Five Families in New York, Joe Colombo, the Italian, Civil Rights League.
Crazy Joe Gallo.
All
coming
that
into the
stuff.
picture. Oh, it's just
Cool connection to Youngstown. Cousin of mine who's actually from Youngstown, Tom Ivana, is on the stage in those scenes. He plays one of the actors in the Italian Civil Rights League. He's right behind Joe Colombo when he gets when he gets off. So there's a Youngstown actor there. Shout out to you, Tom. He's out in L.A. He's a paisan and a cousin of mine. So
nice.
Yeah.
6 degrees of separation, huh?
we're everywhere, man.
I know.
Youngstown
right?
people are everywhere.
We are.
And it's funny that he's the guy behind the guy.
Yeah.
Because that's
Right.
kind of, that's
Yeah.
indicative of how it works, right?
Exactly. It's
So-
always the guy behind the guy.
But going back to your post, Charlie, it got a lot of good discussion there. It just goes to show, the inner workings of some of these Hollywood productions. And, of course, nowadays, The Godfather is revered.
Right.
And I don't care who you are, we all stop and watch it. And no matter how many
every
times
time.
we've seen it, right?
Every time.
Yeah, so...
it's just one of my favorite movies. There's so many pieces that you can pick out, and when you watch The Offer, it just, you get chills because you're sitting there watching it, and you're seeing them do little pieces of the movie, right? And you're like, oh man, I remember that in the movie. I remember that in the movie, you know? And it's just like when you get there and they show Kay and Michael sitting at the table at the wedding, right?
Yeah.
And Michael looks over at Kay and goes, you know, he says, my father made him an offer he couldn't refuse. And she goes, well, what was that? And he looks at her and he goes, he assured him that either his brains or his signature would be on the contract.
Yeah, it's one of those classic
You
lines.
know,
Now, you know, one of the cool things about the show and the book that it's based on is you'll learn that, of course, Hollywood, the way they are, they didn't want Italians. They tried to get everybody but Al Pacino to be in the movie. Francis Ford Coppola stuck to his guns and wanted Al Pacino from the get-go, but the studio wanted, you know, Jack Nicholson, Robert Redford at one point,
yeah,
right?
They had some names out there that they, you know, you look at it and you go, man, if they would have put those people in those, that movie would have been terrible.
Ryan O'Neal, you know.
Yeah.
In fact, the only reason, you know, James Caan is actually in the movie is because they wanted him for Michael, and that was kind of a compromise.
Right.
Was he said, well, he could play Sonny. So
And he played a fantastic Sonny.
he did do a good Sonny. And, you know, Brando's not Italian either.
No.
And Brando did a real good Don.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
Don Corleone. But it's really cool to watch, you know, the actor that plays Coppola talk about, you know, these guys aren't even Italian. You know, you got to have some Italian parts to it to make it stand out, because at that time there had been a few gangster movies that had come out from the studios, you know, mob movies that just tanked. You know, Kirk Douglas was supposed to be a Don in one of them, and it just didn't work. You know, and so that authenticity, and one of the reasons we love The Godfather, right, is it's about a family. It really captures the immigrant family mentality. You know, cooking in the kitchen, everything. It goes back to the sauce. You know.
Yeah, and it shows that pull up your bootstraps. You know, they come here with nothing and they have to find a way.
Yeah.
You know, to make it, not just for themselves, but for their family.
Yeah, and there's a lot of parts of The Godfather. If you actually took the mob out of the story, you know, it's still a great movie about an immigrant family. Could have been, you know, could have been a lot of different ethnicities, right?
Exactly.
So that was kind of the core, you know, of what made that movie so great, I think, and the book, of course. So yeah, thanks again, Charlie. It gives a lot of good discussion for our post of the week. Keep posting, guys. You know, throw out thoughts, stories, anything like that. Share the group. Let's grow. Let's try to get up to 27,000 by next week.
Definitely.
You know, who knows? One thing, by the way, back to our YouTube channel. We are growing the YouTube channel. We're going to be posting more stuff there. We have some Jim Trafficant prison paintings that we're going to start sharing with our subscribers. So it's free to subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/amazingpodcastcompany. You can subscribe to our channel. I think we're at 570, right around 560, somewhere between there. If we get to 600, we're just going to randomly pull one of our subscribers, reach out to them, and we'll do in our video, we'll name the subscriber, and we'll send you one of these authentic Jim Trafficant prison paintings. So it pays to subscribe, guys. It's free to do it. It's the easiest way to show your support for us.
Definitely.
And you'll get something cool out of it. So, one of these, true Youngstown artifacts, Youngstown mob artifacts. So, check us out, guys. Again, share that. As soon as we get to 600, we'll pull somebody and we'll share it. And, we'll do more of that stuff in the future. Another big thanks to our sponsor, Cut and Toast.
Yeah.
Cigars, guys. If you're a cigar smoker, come out to Lowville Road in Struthers. It's they got some real interesting, cool stuff there.
It's a great place. And if you're an aficionado of cigars and you like to smoke and you're looking for a place that's laid back, relaxed, quiet, they do offer memberships there. So, check that out. Their membership room is phenomenal.
Yeah, we were just there the other day.
Phenomenal.
It's such a cool building, such a cool club inside.
Yeah.
And I can't wait, like I said, I can't wait to smoke a stogie in there. And it's It's going to be great.
Oh, yeah.
And we're going to do, we'll introduce you guys in some of these videos coming up, so stay tuned for that. And again, thank you to our sponsor. So appreciate it so much.
Yeah, and we're going to have some other great stuff coming up with them that we're going to be letting you know about here in the upcoming weeks. And it's going to be great, I'm telling you guys. So just keep an ear out for that. Cut and Toast, Lowville Road, Struthers, Ohio. Check them out. We appreciate them sponsoring us. And we hope to see you guys out there.
All right, guys, if you have any suggestions, anything to talk about, you want us to mention, reach out. Post it in the group. Send us a message, whatever you want to do.
Definitely.
And we'll go from there. But we, keep it going, guys. Keep it growing and keep spreading the word that, the Youngstown mob, it's wide open.
Yeah.
So
we're back up and running. So
yeah.
Thank everybody, and we'll see you guys soon. But until next time, for Jimmy and Johnny, take it easy.